Hey everybody, welcome to a Screenwriter's Rant about Captain Marvel. Okay, I promised I would go see the movie on your behalf and evaluate it so you wouldn't have to if you wanted to avoid this movie. So, let me give you the non-spoiler review real quick, and then we'll get into breaking down, which will have many spoilers. So if you're going to see the movie, after a certain point, you're going to have to stop watching the video. Is it a movie worth seeing? Man, it's a tough call. It's not awful. It's not embarrassing. But I would say the strongest act is definitely the first act. There's a lot of fun stuff in that. The setup feels great. And they start to drop the ball in the second act. They kind of recover a little bit in the third act, but overall the movie feels like very much what it is. It's a character that's sort of been hammered into the Marvel universe, and they're just saying, look how important this character is. It's going to be important in Endgame. You're going to need this character. You should be looking at this character. Look at Captain Marvel. And they're doing that way too hard. You know, they sort of did that with Black Panther, but the thing about Black Panther is the character and the movie really stands on its own. This movie wobbles quite a bit, and there are a lot of different reasons for that. Samuel L. Jackson is part of the problem. He's in it, and they talk about the scene where he gets into a fist fight, and he looks old, and he does. He looks like he's really trying hard, but you know, he doesn't look like the young man he's trying to portray in that scene. Now, the other scenes, they managed to gloss it over pretty good, but that one fight scene is a little creaky. So, and there are a few scenes like that that are pretty cringeworthy. Overall, the movie's okay. It does have a lot of plot holes. And probably the biggest problem with the movie is the sort of economy of scale when it comes to superpowers. You know, Captain Marvel seems just so godlike at some points in the movie. You wonder, like, why is there even a fight here? You know, why doesn't she just kill everybody, kill all the bad guys, and go on her merry way? There's also not enough explanation. And I say that as a guy steeped in comics who knows the backstory of all these characters. And, you know, the first act of the movie feels like you have enough information. But by the end of the movie, you realize, oh man, they kind of dropped the ball there, and they really could have done a better job. They're too busy, unfortunately, in the second act mostly, hammering you over the head with how wonderfully powerful and empowering this character is. And the problem with that is it makes Captain Marvel, in the effort to push how strong she is, they actually end up making her look weak. They make the whole movie look weak because they're pushing so hard, and instead of just giving you a good movie. I would have, and it feels dishonest to me, because I would have felt better from what Brie Larson has said and all the pre-press about this. I would have felt better if it was a man-hating feminist movie and Captain Marvel just hated all men and just said, men have kept me down, and did all that. At least it would have been more honest. This just feels like, you know, come on. Just make her a real character. Why do we have to have all this hammering and symbolism about how men keep women down, and oh, the horror of it all, the 1990s. I mean, you remember those horrible times when men were oppressing women on every street corner. I lived in the 90s. In fact, the 90s was the first time we had all this PC culture nonsense. And how did that all work out? Oh, it came back, it went away and then came back even harder. So that should tell you something. It's gonna go away again. And Captain Marvel, you know, if you're a Marvel MCU completist, you're gonna have to go see it. If you're gonna see Endgame, you're gonna have to go see it. I mean, Endgame comes out in a month. How are you gonna miss this? Captain Marvel's not going to be on HBO or any movie channel before April. I don't think. It might be. And certainly Brie Larson didn't do herself or the movie any favors. Brie, if you're watching this, yeah, fat chance, just shut up. If you had shut up, people would have said, it was a decent movie. By insulting all the potential Marvel fans, you put us all on notice, and now we have to go in and evaluate this movie. I personally wasn't even going to go see this movie, not because anything that Brie Larson said, just because Captain Marvel's not a great character. She's just not. She's very much a retrofitted character in the Marvel U, and what little things they could have dropped in about the original Captain Marvel in the comics, they kind of dropped the ball on. Okay, so that concludes my non-spoiler review. Now let's get into the spoilers. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. The structure of the movie from a screenwriting perspective. Interesting, I will say. It does follow the 3-act structure, of course. The first act is kind of not what you expect. You get a little bit of the introduction of the character, but because they go down this path of, and this is an incredibly weak choice in my view, when you do a character that has amnesia and has to discover who they are, you're making a very weak choice. Because you're essentially saying to the audience, oh, I haven't figured out this character, and I'm going to figure it out as I write the story. It's a very weak choice, unless you can make those revelations really zing. And the revelations here do not zing. Partly that's because of the trailers and the way this thing has been rolled out. Partly it's just because it's not a good character to do that. When you start a character in space, as part of the Kree Space Force fighting the Skrull, and she's going to end up on Earth, and she's already human from everything we've heard about this movie, you've kind of already given that part away. If you could have made, if you could have kept that a secret or made Brie, is it Olsen? Whatever her name is. Larson, sorry. If you could have made Brie Larson way more alien and sold us on the idea like she's totally alien instead of giving it away in the trailer, then maybe that would have worked. But it just doesn't. You already go into it knowing, okay, she doesn't remember who she is, but you as the audience member knows. And look, yeah, there's going to be people in the theater who don't know, but the fact that a lot of people do, it's ruining the movie for them. It just means that you're sitting there going, okay, I'll go get popcorn. Maybe she'll catch up to what I already know about her. So that part is very annoying. But despite that, the first act, pretty solid. She's in training. Jude Law trains her. They go on this alien space mission to kill Skrull. It doesn't work out, of course, and she is captured. And the big revelation is, hey, she's human. Right? Because they hook her up to the thing and go through her memories. It's the memories that are annoying. The fact that everybody in every step of her life is trying to hold her down it doesn't feel real. Doesn't feel real. It feels like too much. There wasn't a justification for it, really, other than, I guess maybe her dad was a jerk. But it's not there. The justification isn't there for her to be held down. And they hammer you with that throughout the movie. Now, when I say hammer, it's not so blatant that it distracts from the movie too much, unless you're kind of watching for it like I was. But, from a screenwriting perspective, it was very glaring. They just didn't need to do that. And the justification's just not there. The justification, I guess, for the writers and makers of this movie is, that's the way the world is. Men keep women down. No. No, they don't. And they undermine their entire argument by having Jude Law be the guy who trains her anyway. Of course, he betrays her, and all men are bad in this movie, but there you have it. The first part of the movie is fun. So she's in the Space Force. She goes on the mission. She gets captured. She escapes. She ends up on Earth. And that's the whole first act. All that stuff is pretty fun. It kind of moves quick. Then they introduce Samuel L. Jackson and what's the name from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Greg. Is it Greg Clark or Greg or, you know, that guy from S.H.I.E.L.D.? You know who I mean. Thompson or Johnson or whatever his name is. So they show up, and that's the first sign of, like, why do they show up? They show up with cops. And at first I thought, like, well, I guess they were cops at this point. No, it turns out they're S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. And they're there because there was a report that a woman fell through the roof of a Blockbuster. Now, when you see the way she falls through the roof of the Blockbusters, you know there's no possible way anybody could have saw this. There's just no way. You would have had to have been, because it happened so fast, number one. And number two, it's like, there's no, again, with the superpowers, there's no economy of scale here. The fact that she's able to do that and isn't in a spaceship, you don't know what her powers are. You don't know if she can fly through space on her own or not. She seems to have gadgets, but she's supposed to be human, but then she's bleeding blue. Like, you don't get, there's no, what's the deal here? We don't know. What's the power level here? We don't know. But somehow a security guard sitting in his car in the parking lot sees Brie Larson fall into the middle of a Blockbuster roof, and it just didn't feel real. And then she talks to him, like goes right up to him, ends up going in, you know, to contact Jude Law, and that's how S.H.I.E.L.D. gets there. So it kind of, you can kind of maybe forgive it if the rest of the movie kind of hangs together, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't really feel like it's working to me. There needed to be more of a sense of what the hell S.H.I.E.L.D. was doing. Like, maybe if there had been a shot of guys in NORAD tracking, you know, Brie Larson plummeting it to Earth, because there's kind of a, first off, she's on an alien spaceship being tortured, and then she escapes, and the whole thing falls apart, and she gets sucked out into space, and so it's like, oh well, she gets sucked out into space, gets back in, gets into an escape pod, and crash lands on Earth. So you assume that the alien spacecraft is within the vicinity of Earth, like not millions and millions of miles away, where like in the 90s we couldn't see it. I'm sure satellites in the 90s could have seen a spaceship circling the Earth. So, and it doesn't make any sense that the Skree are really there, torturing her there, until later. It kind of comes together if you put it together yourself, but they never really sort of harp on it. So then she crash lands on Earth, and the Skree also crash land on Earth, but it's never made clear how they get to Earth. So one gets away in an escape pod, the guy who becomes like the Skree we see throughout the rest of the movie. But then when he crawls out of the ocean, he crawls out with like 3 other Skree, and they're like, how did they get there? Were they, I guess they were in the pod with him, but it's never really explained. And then the Skree immediately go to town, shape-shifting and whatnot. And the first thing that happens is the Skree try to kill Brie Larson, which contradicts later in the movie. Because it's not just a random Skree, it's a Skree, it's a Skrull. The Skree are Brie Larson's guys, or the Kree, and the Skrull are the bad guys, the shapeshifters, right? So the shapeshifters try to kill Brie Larson. And immediately there's a big chase scene, which, again, isn't bad. It's fun. And Samuel L. Jackson's in it. And, you know, Coulson, that's his name. Coulson is his partner. he's in it too. So then there's a scene in which the Skrull tries to kill Bree, tries to kill Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson ends up killing the Skrull, and the other guy gets away. So then, for some crazy reason, Bree is trying to track down all the memories that the Skrull dug out of her head. And the problem with this is that the Skree, the Jude Law's guys, are telling her that the Skrull have all this great technology, they can do all stuff to your brain and everything. The Skrull apparently do. So it's totally logical that the things that Brie Larson remembers are planted there by the Skrull. So, but we don't, because of Brie Larson's kind of weird acting, she doesn't sell it to me. She doesn't sell it to me that she believes that's her memories. She says it, but I don't believe her. But that's what drives her to get to this bar where she ends up meeting Nick Fury. And almost immediately, Nick Fury's boss got replaced by one of the Skrull and is hunting him down. But the whole time, these guys got guns out. They're shooting at him. They seem to be trying to kill Brie Larson and Nick Fury. And for no reason, Coulson helps Nick Fury escape. Again, no real explanation. The other thing that happens is this cat tags along. For no reason. It's just there. The implication is that Brie Larson had a cat, I guess, or her scientist friend had a cat that she inherited, which turns out later in the movie isn't a cat. And that's never really explained. But again, the movie just goes on and on. And so at this point, it starts the fray. Nick Fury just immediately takes Space Girl to a secret facility because she says, well, I have memories of this place. And they go, and that's when Coulson and the other guys show up to kill Nick Fury and the cat and her. They escape, of course, and they steal a jet, which Brie Larson, who was a pilot, knows how to fly. But it's like she doesn't remember her life as a pilot. There's no indication she really remembers that. Like, that would have been a good scene. Like, she gets in there and goes, wait a minute, I think I could fly this plane. How can you fly a plane? You're a space girl or whatever. No, I've flown this plane before. Like, something like that. There's nothing like that. She just flies the plane and they escape. They go right to her friends, and no one seems to stop. Now, this is the 90s. It's not the 40s where I assume you could probably fly a plane around because radar is relatively new. This is the 1990s. I assume mid to late 90s by the music and technology. So you're telling me we couldn't track this jet? That SHIELD, this government agency, couldn't track where this jet went? It doesn't make any sense to me that they could steal a plane from a top secret facility and then go to her friend's house. It just felt way too easy. Way too easy. Not Mary Sue easy, although it doesn't quite approach Mary Sue levels, but it's close. It's in the ballpark of Mary Sue. But it becomes more Mary Sue later. Really, they should call this movie Captain Mary Sue. So then we get, and again, we're in the second act here, so things should be escalating, but they're really not. For some reason, Jude Law has taken forever. It's taken a whole movie to get to Earth. Brie Larson got there in like 10 seconds and just falls to Earth. But for some reason, Jude Law takes 22 hours to get to Earth. So he's got all this time where he's in the jet, like talking to the lead bad guy and talking to Bree and betraying her because that all comes out, right? And it's like, who are all these other players in this? We don't know. You're introducing all this stuff on the fly later, like we friggin' know about the guys who run the Skree and that they're gonna wipe out Earth. Maybe? I don't know. Because there's no context for these guys. So you had all this time to introduce space stuff in the beginning of the movie, and you rushed me into Earth and car chases and fighting Skrulls, and you skipped all that part. That was important context. We needed that context in Act 1. Now we're getting in an Act 2, and it feels like, I don't know enough about this movie. What the hell's going on? So then, the big turnaround is, of course, the Skrull are the good guys, and the Skree are the bad guys. And it's like, what? Okay, I get why you did that. You needed it for a big turnaround in Act 2, I guess, but now we've sort of got a lot of questions, like why did those Skrull try to kill Brie Larson early in the movie? Why didn't they try to talk to her in the beginning of the movie before she had to kill one of them or nearly kill one? Why? And then they just show up and start talking to her, and it's like, oh, okay, now you got all this evidence. And they show her this evidence, right? And it's on a CD-ROM. And they play it like, okay, this is the evidence that's going to turn you around. But clearly, when they go into the flashback, that CD-ROM couldn't have recorded everything that happens in the flashback. It could not possibly do that. Because a bunch of stuff happens after the plane crashes, and you assume the black box can only record the stuff that's in the plane. So that doesn't make any sense. But it would make sense that Brie Larson would suddenly remember, oh my God, I remember. But there's never a shot of her going, oh my God, I remember. It's just like you assume she just does and tells everybody. Which, on some level, I understand. They got to push this movie forward. There's a million characters, whatever. But, and let me say, the Skree squad, her squad, looks like the cast of Space G.I. Joe. It's like, okay, I've got, I'm like sword guy, and I'm like sniper, and I'm like this guy. I have this weapon, because call me this code name. Like, it's not very militaristic when you do it like that, even though they have the same uniform, which, as it turns out, they can change. So Jude Law chastises Captain Marvel for changing her uniform, but the question you have to ask yourself is, why does Brie Larson have this bracelet in which she can change the color of her uniform whenever she wants? Like, how is that even remotely useful? It's not like she changes it to camo so people can't see her. She changes it to some sort of crazy Captain Marvel gimmick. Just didn't make any sense. And it made even less sense that the little girl could punch the buttons and get the color she wanted. What's up with that? So it's all these little things that start to add up, that start to annoy you. And you're just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, I guess we're going to find Marvel, it turns out the name of the character is, Annette Bening's character, was a Kree scientist trapped on Earth developing this light drive that will somehow end the war between the Skrull and the Kree. But really, it's revealed that the Skrull needed the light engine to escape the Kree. So it's like, that's not really all that good, because one would have to think two things. First, the Skrull can change shape, and it's really hard to detect them. So they are, in their own way, a threat. And they are a threat in the comic, And two, if they could create this magical engine that takes them far away where the Kree can't get to them, the Kree could eventually find them, I think, with all their crazy space technology. But then, why would the Kree want to find them if they just wanted to go far away and be left alone? See, none of this is really explained. A better explanation might have been that the Kree and the Skrull just hate each other and have been at war so long they're just mortal enemies and they can't make peace. But whatever. You know, in the Marvel comics, the Skrull weren't great. They were evil for the most part. And then later some of this, you know, refugee stuff came up later. But the problem is that that context is missing from this movie. And I think, I don't know how you could have fixed it, but you definitely could have fixed Captain Marvel. You know, Captain Marvel needed something to motivate her, and she doesn't really have it. You know, if her dad beat her, that would have been motivation. Like, I'm going to show you, Dad. That's motivation. There maybe is a little of that. I mean, not that he beats her in the flashback, but he sort of keeps her down. But it's not all that dark, and it just feels like in the memory, he runs over after she crashes the go-kart and says something to her that upsets her, but she just crashed her go-kart and got hurt, so she's mad. So it, you know, he could be a wonderful father outside that flashback. We don't know. It's not enough. It's not enough to hang your hat on. It's just sort of there, and it doesn't mean much in the context of the character. So then we get to the wacky third act. Now the third act all takes place on this lab that's in orbit above the Earth that has been hidden the entire time. And the initial thing is that the Skrull need to find this lab to get the core item that drove the magical engine that the Skrull need to go away. Right? You follow? Here's where it gets convoluted. So they find the lab, and as it turns out, they don't care about that. And it's the Tesseract, which, okay, the Tesseract, that's part of the Marvel U. Great. Wonderful. Glad you tied it all in. But they don't want that. It turns out there's a bunch of Skrull trapped up on the lab hiding, which begs another question. You know, they were up there hiding. Where's the food? How did they survive up there? Because the implication is they've been up there for years. They've been up there at least 6 years since Marvel died. So, you know, there's no explanation why. Then there's this cat. The cat that's been hanging around. And one of the Skrulls say, "Oh, get that thing away from me." And he says some crazy nonsense word. And it turns out, yes, the cat is an alien. Okay. But the alien cat doesn't act very consistently. No one seems to have any control over it. And it's like, where did this cat come from? Did it come... There's no wind-up, you know, about the cat. You know, it would have made sense if Brie Larson, who was on the Kree, one of the Kree worlds, early in the movie, had at least seen a cat. Then you could say, okay, well, the Kree have these creatures that look like cats, but they're not cats. But then that would have undermined the big surprise, which is, hey, it's not a cat. I get that, but it just kind of comes out of nowhere. And the resolution with the cat, and I'm giving away all the big secrets here, so be warned, is just dumb, in my view. So, we've got this big fight on the magic lab in the sky, which again doesn't make all that much sense if all that Jude Law, now revealed as the bad guy, wants to do is kill everybody. Because all he has to do is kill everybody in the lab. I guess he wants the magic tesseract. But there's no context as to why he wants it. And if he wants it so bad, it seems to me that the Skrull would want it too, if not to use it as a weapon against the Kree, to at the very least have it as a bargaining chip. But they don't seem to care about it. So, again, my brain is hurting trying to figure out this movie. So then we got this big giant fight on the ship where she has to fight her old pals. And that's okay, but it's kind of boring in a lot of ways, because first they have this scene where she gets jacked up by the great intelligence, whatever they call it, I forget. She meets it in the beginning, meets it at the end, and then finally breaks free of her controls. But the thing is, the whole crux of the movie is Captain Marvel gets her powers not from the Kree, but from this moment when she was a pilot and was helping Annette Bening, who was the other Kree scientist, build this crazy engine. And rather than let Jude Law get it, she fires a gun, blows it up, and the explosion gives her superpowers. That's where she really gets her superpowers. And somehow, Jude Law not only understands that she gets superpowers from that explosion, he decides that he needs to wipe her memory and put a gadget on her neck to keep her in check and turn off her powers when he needs to. But the gadget is right there. It's right on her friggin' neck. So if the gadget is on if there's something on your neck, chances are you'd go, what's this on my neck? Can I take this off? Or you just pull it off and go, what the heck is this? Like, that doesn't happen. She just walks around with this thing on her neck, and I guess that's okay. Now, there would have been a lot of ways to handle this that would have been great. The first of which would have been to lie to Bree and say, well, you gotta have that thing on your neck or you'll die. Like that, would have been the way they did it in Escape from New York and Escape from L.A., where they lie to Snake Plissken and tell him he's got this horrible... No, they did it in the second movie. In Escape from L.A., they inject Snake Plissken again. They tell him it's an injection that's going to kill him if they don't do if he doesn't do what they say. But it turns out they just lied to him, which was a funny moment in the movie. In this movie, they just don't even bother to do that. I guess you're supposed to assume that dampens her powers, and probably does. But if she could just pull it off, like, what the hell good is that? They've got all this super alien technology. You're just going to put a sticky there? It doesn't make any sense. The cool way to have done it would have been to give her the Captain Marvel bracers that the original Captain Marvel had, the one who died, the male Captain Marvel. Give her the wristbands and tell her that her powers comes from the wristbands. Because that would have made sense in that all the other characters in her Kree squad had weapons. So that could have been her weapon. And they could have told her, your power comes from these bands, and we could shut them off at any time. Meanwhile, they lied to her, and if they don't come from the bands, they come from her hands because she has actual superpowers. But they didn't do that. So consequently, you had this scene, which also happens early in the movie with the Skrull, where she just escapes. She just generates enough power until finally she could break free. That's not a very interesting moment. It's just boring. Okay? It's kind of like Superman beating Kryptonite. Nobody wants to see that. Like, Superman does something clever, so the Kryptonite goes away. Or he tricks people. He doesn't just, like, gun the engine until he beats it. That's lame. So, way to drop the ball there. That's the major flaw in this climactic scene. It's just, there's no punch in it. There's no punch in that. okay, she has the power all along. So it's just a matter of time before she figures it out and kills you all. Great plan, Jude Law. Great plan. You know, and again, this is why she's kind of Captain Mary Sue. She's just super, super powerful. No weaknesses. And now she's going into Endgame with no weaknesses. So the original Captain Marvel had these bracers that gave him his powers initially, and the bracers made him sick, and I think that's why he died, something like that. And then later he turned out he had the power, I don't know. But the thing is, there's no economy of scale on her powers. So with Tony Stark, Iron Man, we get it. He has an Iron Man suit. He doesn't have any actual superpowers. With the Hulk, we get it. The angrier he gets, the stronger he gets. Scale. Captain America, he's, you know, he's not Superman, but he's got a lot of powers. He can fight really well, but, you know, it's limited. It's limited. Thor, you know, he's got a lot of powers, loses his hammer. Now he has less powers. He's still kind of a powerful guy, but he's not totally indestructible. Captain Marvel, I don't know. She can fly through space now, and, you know, she can put a leather jacket on, and the leather jacket survives in space. She's got a little thing that covers her face and her hair. Does she need that? I don't know. She can, you know, all kinds of glowy stuff happens. How does she got this power from an explosion? Where's this power come from? I don't know. So maybe that's explained in Endgame. I don't know. And then after credit scene, which are pretty crucial because, you know, it's a Marvel movie. I mean, we knew she was going to win at the end. That's part of the problem with these superhero movies is they're becoming less and less exciting because we get it. You know, we knew she was going to win at the end. But they're doing all this twisting and turning to give you a surprise, and it's just not working. You know, the whole, I'm going to find the Skrulls, a happy planet to live on, doesn't really work for me. Sorry, that's not a big revelation. I wasn't emotionally invested in the Skrull. You set them up as an enemy. You didn't give me any evidence that they were actually just trying to live their lives. Like some evidence would have been like, oh, don't kill me. No, Grandma Skrull, you've killed Grandma Skrull. She wouldn't have hurt a fly. Ah, now you've killed me. Like, give me something to hang my hat on. I get it, you needed to surprise me, but it wasn't that big of a surprise. And once you revealed that the Skrull weren't bad guys, now I know everything, basically. So, the movie's just too convoluted. There's too much going on. It needed a more traditional, I think, story. The fact that it takes place in the 90s has almost zero bearing on the entire movie. They do a bunch of cutesy things at the end with the name of Avengers, and that was lame. And then, you know, she shows up, and now it's going to be Carol Danvers and the Avengers, and it's all going to be about Endgame. But this really feels like being in a waiting room, getting your tires rotated, and you're being mildly entertained, but you know it's not Endgame. It's not. Again, it's not a disaster, total disaster as a movie. There's some fun scenes in it, but at this point, we're getting tired of it. You know, Nick Fury as a character, they never really showed him doing anything cool. Maybe in the beginning they did a little bit. Now they're trying to, you know, backpedal this whole, you know, Nick Fury, the early days. It just wasn't that exciting. You know, they needed to give Samuel L. Jackson something else to do and Coulson something else to do if we were going to get excited about them. They're just there. They're just facilitators. And that's how they've always been throughout the MCU. You know, Coulson was there and he found Thor's hammer and he got a couple other people together, but, you know, they feel like they just feel like they've got no money. Shield is like nothing, and they're working on a budget, and it just doesn't ring true. And then the after credit scene with the cat is just dumb. The cat coughs up the Tesseract. What's up with that? That doesn't mean anything. He does it on Nick Fury's desk, and that's the last credit sequence? Like, the Tesseract is supposed to be something important in the Marvel Universe. It's supposed to be this thing that's going to change the universe. And we saw it in Captain America. We saw it in Thor. We saw it in all these places. So, are you telling me this is where the Tesseract was the entire time? Because that doesn't make any sense. Because when they cut to Nick Fury's empty desk and the cat coughs up the Tesseract, the implication is the cat, which had swallowed the Tesseract in the middle of the movie, held it in all that time. So, what about the one that was on Valhalla? And the one that was in Captain America? Was that the same one, or are these different Tesseracts? And what do these Tesseracts mean? We don't know. It's not like the Infinity Stones, where we kind of, well, we didn't know, but at least they seemed important. By having the cat throw it up, it undermined the whole thing. It didn't feel important at all. The screenwriters felt so desperate to make Brie Larson's character likable. And let me tell you how Brie Larson delivers a funny line. She's a good actress, I will say, because when she delivers the line, the funny throwaway line, she's good until the moment the line is over, and then the comedy faucet goes off like that, just like that. It's amazing to watch because it's like she's got the delivery down pat, and she says it with a smile, and then almost immediately the smile goes. So, I mean, she has the skill to act, but there's no sustainability there. She's not naturally likable. Gal Gadot, Wonder Woman, totally likable. Every scene, every frame I've seen her in, she's got a much softer delivery and body language. Brie Larson just, her whole face just tenses up when she's not delivering those lines, when she's not totally thinking, oh, I gotta be likable, gotta be likable. The moment she stops thinking that, it goes back to tense and like a little too intense. That's my opinion. And that, to me, really hurts the movie. I don't know who else they could have gotten to be Captain Marvel, but that's almost irrelevant. The problem is, who does this character speak to? It's like, okay, we wanted to speak to little girls. Carol Danvers, Ms. Marvel, doesn't feel like a real character. She doesn't feel like a real person. She feels like a manufactured hero that you're shoving down our throats and saying, love her, love her. She's so powerful. Why don't you love her? That's not about the power. You know, the cool thing about superheroes is not their superpowers per se. David Banner, or Bruce Banner, has a lot of other things going for him. In the MCU, it's that, you know, Mark Ruffalo's got this whole thing where he's kind of a neurotic guy, and, you know, he doesn't want to get angry, and he's sort of perfect for that because that's the way Mark Ruffalo is. Like, that's sort of his personality. You can see him as a guy who doesn't want to get angry at people, doesn't want to shout. At least he sells it to me. You know, Captain America, he is a guy out of time, and he's trying to fit in, but, you know, they still got those old man scenes with him, which really are great. You know, Natasha is just this intense super spy who, and you know, again, that they didn't give Black Widow a movie is a disgrace. Scarlett Johansson is a great actress. I'd pay good money to see her in a movie, and I certainly would have paid good money to see her and Mark Ruffalo do the Hulk Black Widow movie, because they were an item in the MCU. Why not do the movie? Why not do the missing movie with the Hulk and Black Widow running around. You know, I mean, obviously the way they set it up for Ragnarok, they couldn't do it, but maybe they could have done it before Ragnarok, and it would have been cool. But you know, for whatever reason, they didn't do it. But she, to me, comes off as a better hero. She's competent. She's fun. She's sexy. Brie Larson, you know, she's a good-looking girl, but I didn't find her sexy one iota. And I don't know if she was sort of fighting that in the movie, or the director was sort of fighting that. Not that I necessarily need that in a female character, but, you know, it just was like, it felt like, okay, we can't make this girl sexy because we got to make her so super empowering. I didn't really see why that had to happen. Like, why couldn't you have just made her a normal person, you know, with flaws? Where were her flaws? I didn't see it. You know, the idea that her flaw was she couldn't control her emotions, and that Jude Law was trying to teach her to control her emotions. Then the message is in the movie at the end, when she like zaps Jude Law instead of fighting him fair, the message is she can't control her emotion. Well done. Well done. You've created an empowering woman character who can't control her emotions. That's dumb. That's like saying, you shouldn't control your emotions, ladies and gentlemen. Women shouldn't control their emotions. They should be crazy, wild, whatever they feel like. No. That is a terrible message to send to little girls who are going to want to be Captain Marvel. It also makes her powers, like, again, they're just sort of there, but they're not explained. You know, I kind of get the scale of powers with other superhero characters. And really, one of the reasons I like Black Widow way better than this character is because Black Widow doesn't have any powers and she totally kicks ass. She has no powers. She's just super cool. And she can totally kick ass. You know? It's just like... And Brie Larson at the end doesn't kick Jude Law's ass without using her powers. So what's that tell you? She needs her powers. It's a crutch. It's now a crutch. It's the wrong message to send in a movie. Wrong. And the total ending with her sending Jude Law back to the Kree. I'm going to come and settle this once for all. What? There's no... How? How is she going to settle it once and for all? What's the plan there? I don't know. Are they going to explain that in Endgame? I don't see how they're going to have the time because they got to get the Thanos. You know, that Brie Larson's behavior on the press junket for this movie was really dumb because the movie's not good enough to justify that. I mean, had it been better, you could say, well, gee, better shut my mouth. I mean, that was a good movie. It's not good. I mean, it's... In the context of the MCU, if it was just a standalone movie, forget it. You know, in the context of the MCU, yes. You're basically... You wedged in a movie that I had to see because it's part of the MCU. I still haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, which I got to see before Endgame. But... you know, this movie felt very unnecessary. And, you know, the only reason I saw it is because I'm definitely going to see Endgame, and Disney sort of forced me into seeing it. But I can't say I'm happy about it. And from a screenwriting perspective, there's just so many problems, you know, in terms of... and I think it mirrors the comic a lot. Because the comic has similar problems. This idea of beating fans over the head with women's empowerment. There's no economy of scale in the comic really either. So, you know, if you're just going to make a character that's super all-powerful, you know, what's the last fight in Endgame going to be? It's just going to be Captain Marvel going, and Thanos going, and then Thanos' glove slowly melts away, and then she beats him? Like, what is that? That's not a way to win. That's boring. It just means like, well, you were stronger. I mean, they've had a million Superman movies, and Superman never wins that way. Although I didn't see the last one, so maybe he does in that. But because that's the Zack Snyder one, which I'm not seeing that. Um, it's not the way to make the character win. The way characters win is they win through doing something clever. They don't just win because they're stronger. They don't just overcome people by strength. They overcome something within themselves. And I didn't see that in this movie. They kind of tried to telegraph it to me, and they told me it was there, but I didn't see it. And you have to show. Don't tell in a movie, Captain Mary Sue. Show me, don't tell. So what can you learn from this movie? Well, you can learn that even the big studios make mistakes. And I would give the movie, I think I'd give the movie a 4. 4 out of 10 keggers for my frat boy at the movies review, which I do on Super Frat. I think I'd give it about a 4. It's just, you know, it's okay. It's passable. I would have preferred to see it on Netflix for, you know, what I'm already paying for Netflix, rather than to pay $12.25 to see a movie. God, movies are expensive. That's too much. Too much to see that movie. And I saw a bunch of trailers, 20 minutes of trailers, and I must have been like 8 trailers. And out of those, there's maybe 2 movies that look interesting. One of them's Dark Phoenix, which might be good. It's like right on the fence. And I already forgot the other one. Was it Endgame? No, it wasn't Endgame. It was something else. Something else. Oh, the Spider-Man movie. Spider-Man movie looks fun. You know, that looks fun. Captain Marvel, man. Jeez. It's just... There's a reason. There's a reason I think they constructed this narrative about how trolls were going to trash this movie. Because they wanted to make people go, oh, I'm not going to listen to those trolls. I'm not going to listen to those Rotten Tomatoes people. I'm going to go see the movie anyway. I saw the movie, and I saw the first showing of the movie. The parking lot was not full of fans. I guarantee you that for Endgame, that parking lot will be full. That theater will be full. The theater wasn't full. I would say the theater was about... I even asked how many people had sat. When I got to the theater, the movie was listed as 7:01 or 7 o'clock to start. I got there at 7:01, bought my ticket, asked the girl. She said there are 143 seats sold. It's a 400-seat movie theater. So that wasn't even half. And I would say maybe the theater was a little more than half full by the time the movie friggin' started 20 minutes later. And that doesn't bode well. Now, it's a Thursday night, so take whatever from that, but doesn't bode well. But I am going to go see Endgame, and I think Endgame will be the end of the MCU. I think that's it for superheroes in the world of movies. I think they're going to pull the plug on them. They might squeeze a few last dollars out of the fans if they've got a few of the actors left or a few things in the pipeline. I don't see them doing superheroes anymore, and the recent rumors that Marvel Comics is closing, I totally believe that. The fact that Joe Quesada and C.B. Saluski had to go on a panel and deny the rumors is a sure sign to me that Marvel Comics is closing, and they probably already know. They're just going to keep their mouths shut and, you know, skate to the next job, whatever that is. And I've said it for years, Disney's going to license the comics out, and other comic book companies will make them, and that's a win-win for Disney. They don't lose a dime if they license the characters. They get a licensing fee, they get part of the profit, they get to approve everything. Oh, we don't get all that? Oh, I guess you aren't doing Spider-Man. And, you know, they've been milking that horse with the Donald Duck, the Donald Duck comics for a long time. And they made a lot of money on that. And Gladstone made a lot of money on that back in the day. And now they may do that. That'll probably be what'll happen to the Simpsons comics as well, because Disney, you know, the whole Fox deal or whatever. So that's what I suspect anyway. Maybe I'll be writing for Disney if they start doing a Simpsons comic. Who knows? I don't know. It's a strange world. Anyhow, that's my rant. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm exhausted. I'm going to go post this. I'll see you next time.